Hi, I'm your host, Tracy Daly. My friend sent me a message the other day. It read, "Sometimes it feels like the world is out for us for no reason, and as much bullshit as it is, all we can really do is grin and bear it. Just wanted to say thanks for your support, mate. Really does mean a lot to me. I'd also like to tell you how proud of you I am. After watching the majority of I Am a Killer on Netflix, I've come to notice most either had alcohol, drug users for parents, or either got abused or sexually abused as children. Knowing what to do about your upbringing, you could have gone down the same path, but the choices you made, the right ones, have led to where you are now, with a wonderful family, 2 lovely daughters. Honestly, mate, I don't care how gay it sounds, I'm proud of you." I honestly didn't know how to reply to that. I'd actually started to write him out a huge reply based on statistics of people in the care system. I had the numbers slightly higher than they are today. I had the chances of being in prison, a mental institute, or dead by my own hand at 75% or above. In actual fact, it's a little less than this, but not by much. Let's have a read together. People who've been in the system are 6 times more likely to commit a crime or get a caution, according to The Guardian, which goes on to say actually half of those who've been in custody have been in the care system at some point. So, from my understanding, that's half the population that have been in custody either charged or not have been in the care system. Half, give or take, of thefts, arson, rape, murder and worse. Half of petty crimes, and half, give or take, of those with no further action against them. That's not like 3% here. That's a huge percent. The BBC website, however, says an independent review is being launched to examine why so many children in care in England and Wales end up in the criminal justice system. The Prison Reform Trust, which set up the review, says children aged 10 to 17 in care are more than 5 times as likely to be in trouble than others. The Lord Laming-led inquiry will look at how often children change home and how authorities deal with behaviour. A government spokeswoman said they were committed to helping care leavers. Fewer than 1% of children and young people are in the care of local authorities, but a third of boys and 61% of girls in custody either are in care or have been, Lord Laming, a former probation officer and social worker, had said. It's a huge step for the state to assume the parenting of a child or young person, he added. With that comes the responsibility to provide stability, security, and hope for the future. The BBC goes on to explain what another young person said. What I've heard from the different police officers when I've been arrested is like, you're a kid in care. You're never going to get out of this way of life. And Russell, who was taken into care as a teenager and has spent time in a Young Offenders Institute, told the BBC, "If I'd had the support around me when I was younger, I would have stayed as smart and sweet and innocent. But it was the fact that I've built myself up with so much anger. I'm just not used to anybody supporting me." This was in 2015. Did I always keep on the straight and narrow? Hell no, wish I had. I've done things which I look back on today and shake my head at. Not out of ego or anything, out of shame in my part. Although I understand why and how I did the things that I've done, I cannot let go of the fact that the day will come when my little girls look at me in a different light, because I'll have had to explain to them the trouble I've been in, how and why it occurred, and at times what I'd done to cause it. I won't go into everything here, because that's from my books, Tracie's Story and Checkmate. However, I will go into a few of the later dealings with the police. How did I go off the rails? I used to love Aikido. I loved the fact that it was strict. I liked that I had to take my shoes off when I went in, bow to my sensei. Then the sensei in the picture who had founded Aikido, I forget his name now. That I had to have control, be calm, and that nothing mattered apart from how I breathed and how I moved. None of the stuff at home mattered during this hour. I was to concentrate only on my Aikido. I practiced for hours in front of the mirror, dividing my body into parts as I went through the motions in practice. My granddad loved it too, and went to his own lessons. I was close with my granddad for a long time. Later, I was dying to go to a boxing club in a little town in Winsford. I'd watch them from a distance whenever I got the chance. Going through the motions, I imagine I was one of the in crowd who were allowed to go. I wasn't, for the fear I'd turn violent like my father who'd killed his wife and hurt his kids. A reoccurring theme from my foster placement is that I'd turn out just like my father. Later still, when I returned to my father, I got straight into kickboxing. I enjoyed the club, but the guy was very arrogant. I'd been bullied a lot in the past, and I found I let it happen. I didn't know why I'd let it happen, but I had. There was something about being punished which made me feel terrible, but also allowed me to believe all the negative things I'd heard about my past and me. So I could relate to these guys saying that a life of crime was their only way. I'd grown up with criminals. My uncles had been in for ABH, assault and car crimes, including theft. I'm pretty sure one was in for GBH. I'd heard endless stories about armed robberies. I'd seen an unfair amount of violence growing up, and so in all honesty, I wanted to learn to defend myself. I was scared. I'm not playing the victim here. I was also a vicious little bastard where I put my mind to it. But for the most part, it was fear. This instructor one lesson a couple of months in asked me to spar with a lady. I said no. He told me I was sparring with her whether I liked it or not. I let her hit me repeatedly and just blocked her from time to time. I didn't know any punches, or kicks. I didn't throw any punches or kicks, and she was light in her work out of choice. It wasn't a sexist thing. My father had killed my mother. I wasn't hitting a woman, it was that simple. It had been playing on my mind. I wasn't going to let him do that to me. He pulled me up in the front of the group and said, "If you won't spar with her, you'll spar with me. It's your choice." I sparred with him. I didn't win, but he didn't expect me to never quit either. He didn't expect me to fight. He didn't expect the fight that I put up. I landed a few good hits before he called it a day. But he did call it a day, and technically he'd won. A couple of weeks later he got arrested. He'd bottled a guy in a pub in Chester and got sent down. I guess he had previous, or he really hurt the guy or something. I don't know, but that was the end of my kickboxing. I started Muay Thai and I loved it. It was like a dance in part, and so it reminded me of going through the motions with my granddad in Aikido, and also, oddly, of dancing with my mother as a child. That said, the intensity was huge. The kicks were hard, and I learnt to use my elbows and my knees too. I remember lining up against the wall and having someone throw lefts and right into my stomach. We'd swap round. It wasn't done to hurt. It was done to condition our bodies and to understand our breathing, how it worked. I loved it. So for me, martial arts was really important. It played a huge part in keeping me in the right mindset. Unfortunately, not everyone who does martial arts has the same mentality. My granddad wasn't as observant by a long shot as he should have been. He allowed my nan to cause some serious abuse to my little sister. And my nan was absolutely vile to her. You know my father was a psychopath and abusive to the kids. He went on to kill my mother. Yes, it left me with some serious trust issues in relation to authority figures. So much so that I turned mute for a long time. I say authority figures. Most people automatically jump to parents and carers. Let me explain. Authority figures for me were dentists, teachers, doctors, foster carers, the police. Imagine you've had the people you're supposed to care for you the most neglect or abuse you. Then you are told to trust other people who are supposed to care for you. They're not even your blood family. They're not blood. An adult may be able to understand this, but a child certainly can't. A part of that stayed with me, metamorphosed into my adult life. There's something called Oedipus complex. A strange thing where subconsciously I'm trying to outdo my father. According to the therapist, you understand. Part of this may well be factual, part of it is not. However, the trust issue thing is certainly quite on the button. Can you imagine having to trust someone after that abuse who comes at you with the attitude that you're a criminal, someone who has a legal right to detain and restrain you? Is the first instinct of a person who's been abused then going to be to comply? Let me be clear from the off. The best way I've learnt to understand myself is literally to be aware of every negative thought that I've had and find ways to change them to positive ones. That's incredibly difficult. If you want to know more, you can find out all about that in my third book, Mentality. It's available on Amazon, paperback and digital. So I know at times I've fallen into the category of making assumptions and looking at things wholly in a negative light. I know if you go onto Jay Wiley's radio show, you will find thousands of cases of really good police officers in America who've witnessed horrendous things and gone on to discuss how they survived and coped with the daily trauma, much of which relates to childhood trauma as well, as discussed on this show. It's epic. Go and listen to it. However, I can only talk about my own personal experiences, and so today, thanks to my friend's message, you get to hear a little bit about me. I'd had enough of my father kicking off at home. I'd returned to him after he'd killed my mother, and yes, my denial was that strong I thought I could get the whole family back together. I didn't believe for a minute he was a psychopath. I was wrong. After he'd had me up against the wall threatening to kill me for the second time, I decided I was off. I got in touch with a couple of friends to tell them I was out and that I needed a knife and a gun. I honestly didn't know what the hell I was going to do with them other than go camping, as I had in the Scouts, and looked after myself. I was 15. The pellet gun was just me, dicking around in the woods, shooting trees and trying to feel a little bit safer out there on my own. As it happens, I bumped into a lad I knew we'll call Mike, and he decided to tag along. We talked all the way out into the woods, a good couple of hours hike. We built a bivouac and a fire. As the night turned in, he got talking about his family, how he'd wanted to run away to teach his mum a lesson, how she was okay with his older brother smoking weed in the house, but not him, that she wanted him to stay on the right track and not throw his life away like his brother had. I assume he'd got into harder drugs and maybe had a little spell away from home. She wanted her younger son not to follow in the same footsteps. I was listening, in part I was sympathising, and in part I was wishing I had the family that cared about me that much. I cracked on collecting firewood, adding bracken to the bivvy whilst he talked. He needed to talk, and hell, I needed to feel I could help someone. He went on about the unfairness of it all for a good while, how she'd searched his room, gone through his private stuff, thrown out his stash, kicked him out, told him he could come back when he was clean. Then he finally asked me what I thought. I told him, "You don't want to know." He said seriously, "What do you think?" So I told him. I love my mate Aikenhead like a brother. That I'd never tell him that, of course, but that I did. That my dad got his back bust up after slapping my mother around most days. And my grandparents died inside a few months. I'd lived with them most of my life. That my father ditched us into care and killed his wife. I left care after several arguments and got back with him to find he's just as bad as he always was, if not worse. So as much as I love my mate Aikenhead, and I do, I'd kill him in an eye blink if it meant one more minute with my mother. I'd been looking out over the large lake the entire time and glanced around at him. I'd done it partly for effect. I wanted to scare the shit out of him. I wanted him to know life was rough. I wanted him to cherish his mother and go and sort his shit out. He was on the brink of tears. "Shit, man. Sorry," he said. "So sorry." What do I think? I think you invest in some deodorant, go smoke your shit outside, cake yourself in deodorant, go home and be thankful your mum is alive to give a shit about you. My voice broke. I hadn't intended it, but it did. I suddenly didn't want to be camping anymore. "She's right too, you know. You're a decent fucker," I said. Later, we made toast over the fire. I thought he'd brought butter. He thought I had. Shit, it was a couple of hours until the post office would be open. Neither of us were sleepy, and so we headed back to town. The post office cum shop would be open earliest, and so we waited outside for it to open. We just didn't think at all and took the knife and pellet gun with us. I say we, but it was me who was carrying. I ditched the knife in a hedgerow on the way out because it was a fair-sized thing that I didn't want that anywhere near town. I didn't think of getting nicked. I just couldn't explain it away as camping because of the size of it. Naturally, pitch black, and we were sat on some steps opposite the post office waiting for the place to open around 6 a.m. when a plain car pulls up by us. 2 coppers get out and have a chat. I explain all is going well until he asks us to empty our pockets. I do, and I explain to him it's just a 177 gat gun, it's perfectly legal, it's a pellet gun. He asks if it's loaded, and of course, I left it loaded, didn't I? So we go through the motions of him standing trying to figure out how to fire this gat gun whilst his buddy takes our details and we're put in the back of the car. I refuse to give my name, but Mike is straight out handing all his details over. So I guess they question us separately and he finds out who I am. I honestly can't recall. The next minute my foster father was picking us up. They explained to me that they believed me, but they had to take the gun because there were 2 guys outside the post office at 6 a.m. with a gun and a small penknife they'd also found. Naturally, I didn't tell them about the massive big Rambo knife I had. I went back to pick it up later, but they were right. Although they were quite arrogant in how they communicated, they were seemingly decent guys. That was my first. Did I trust them? Hell no. They took me back to care when I was living with my father. That was their job.